November 1922, one of the greatest archaeological discoveries was made. Located right next door to the Royal Albert Hall in Kensington, this 5-bedroom duplex apartment has a very important archaeological link. Howard Carter, who discovered the tomb of King Tutankhamun in Egypt in 1922. Described as the archaeological triumph of the 20th century, Carter's incredible discovery fascinated the world. He lived in his flat in Albert Court until his death in 1939. Carter spent much of his childhood with relatives in the Norfolk market town of Swaffham. Nearby was the mansion of the Amherst family, Didlington Hall, containing a sizable collection of Egyptian antiques, which sparked Carter's interest in that subject. In 1891 the Egypt Exploration Fund sent Carter to assist an Amherst family friend in the excavation and recording of Middle Kingdom tombs at Beni Hassan. Carter was hired to paint the wall art on the tomb walls. In 1907, Carter was hired by wealthy English aristocrat Lord Carnarvon, who was fascinated by Egyptology. With Carnarvon's backing, Carter led the excavation of Egyptian nobles' tombs. For their first discovery they traveled to the west bank of Luxor, and found the decorated tomb of Tetteke, an early 18th dynasty mayor of Thebes. Their following few years together were equally successful. They unearthed a series of private tombs and lost temples such as those of Queen Hatshepsut and Ramses IV. In 1914, Carnarvon received a license to dig at a site where it was believed the tomb of King Tutankhamun rested. Carnarvon gave the job to Carter. All excavations were halted with the outbreak of World War I. Both Carter and Carnarvon were called up for their country. Their discovery work was halted until 1917, when Carter began working on the tombs again. After several relatively successful seasons working together, Carter and Lord Carnarvon began excavating in earnest in the Valley of the Kings. Carter stated that there were several pieces of evidence already found: a faience cup, a piece of gold foil, and a cache of funerary items which all bore the name of Tutankhamun. This convinced him that the tomb of the king was still to be found. Carter also believed that the locations of these items pointed to a specific area where they might find King Tutankhamun's tomb. Carter was determined to systematically search this area by excavating down to the bedrock. Carter did not have much to show after 5 years of excavating in the Valley of the Kings. Thus, Lord Carnarvon decided to stop the search. However, after a long discussion, and seeing how determined Carter was about his abilities to locate the tomb, Carnarvon relented, and agreed to one last season. By November 1, 1922, Carter began his final season working in the Valley of the Kings by having his workers expose the ancient workmen's huts at the base of the tomb of Ramesses VI. By the 4th day of work, they had found something. A step had been cut into the rock. The initial stone step, which led down to the tomb, was discovered by accident on the day of November 4 by a young water boy named Hussein Abdul Rasul. Twice a day he would bring large pottery jars filled with water to the excavation site. At the site, the boy would take the jars off the donkey and set them in the sands. While swishing the sand away on that miraculous day, he uncovered a flat stone which looked as if it was sculpted. He rushed to tell the workers of his find, and basically the rest is history.
Can you see anything? Yes, wonderful things.
In November of 1922, after 5 years of searching, Howard Carter and his patron Lord Carnarvon finally discovered the last resting place of Tutankhamun. His tomb was found directly beneath the tomb of Ramses VI, which had been built much later on. As a result, the debris from the construction had been dumped into the entrance to Tutankhamun's tomb. A stroke of luck for us today, since the boy king's tomb thus remained intact and hidden for more than 3,000 years. This is the antechamber, looking exactly as it did when Howard Carter found it. Inside this chamber alone, Carter and other members of his excavation team found and recorded almost 700 objects. Strange-looking animal figures, statues, and gold. Everywhere, the brilliant glint of gold. Look inside here. This stool here has been decorated to look like a leopard skin, and the legs shaped like duckbills. Amazing. But most significantly are the 3 large gilded beds, each with these strange-looking animal heads and elongated bodies. Before the burial, Tutankhamun's mummy would have been laid upon each of these beds in turn, so that the dead king could participate in mysterious rituals to become one with the sky goddess and be transformed into the immortal sun. Underneath the bed with the lions' heads, Carter found this throne made of wood, of ebony. This would have been used by Tutankhamun as a child. Under the second bed, decorated with the cow-headed goddess, there lay this whole pile of strange egg-shaped white vessels. These would have been filled with food to be consumed by the king during his journey into the realm of the dead. But what Carter found under this bed, the one decorated with the hippo's heads, took his breath away. This magnificent throne of the king, covered in gold from top to bottom and richly embellished with inlays of glass and precious stone. Wow, it is beautiful. However, it seems likely that grave robbers broke into the tomb shortly after the young pharaoh was buried. A number of golden items lie carelessly dumped into a heap in this corner of the chamber. Fortunately, the would-be thieves seem to have been interrupted because the other contents of the tomb remain just as we see them here. It took 3 months for Carter and his team to clear out this chamber. These 2 figures standing guard indicated where the entrance to the burial chamber must be. So on February 17, 1923, Carter began tearing down the wall that separated the chamber from the mummy of the pharaoh. These 2 figures standing guard indicated where the entrance to the burial chamber must be. So on February 17, 1923, Carter began tearing down the wall that separated the antechamber from the mummy of the pharaoh. When the opening was large enough, Carter was able to peek through and spy a wall of gold. This later turned out to be a golden shrine. Between the shrine and the chamber walls, there was just enough room to squeeze through. When Carter opened the doors of the first shrine, there was a second shrine inside. And inside of that, a third shrine. And inside of that, yet another. But inside the doors of the fourth shrine, there lay a stone sarcophagus. Inside, they found a heavy, stunningly gilded coffin. And it turned out that it concealed 2 more coffins. The innermost coffin weighed about 225 pounds and was made of solid gold. It was here that the king's mummy had been laid to rest. The third chamber was the treasury, and here we're able to see what's inside. Like a silent guardian, the black, jackal-headed god Anubis sits atop a gilded shrine mounted on a sledge and keeps watch over the treasury of King Tutankhamun, a duty he performed very well for over 3,000 years. He is the mysterious protector god and keeps watch over the body of the deceased and keeps them from coming to any harm. Behind the god Anubis is a bust of the heavenly cow. To the left lay several magnificent chests of ebony decorated with gold and ivory. These concealed precious jewelry. Behind me, Carter discovered a whole fleet of model ships stacked on these black chests. These were special sun and moon barges for the journey across the sky, and also boats for traversing the Nile. These little black shrines contained gilded deities and royal figures. But the chamber also contained hundreds of everyday objects that would serve the young pharaoh well in the afterlife. Clothing, small pieces of furniture, musical instruments, board games, tools, weapons, and even cosmetics. But for Howard Carter, the man who discovered the tomb, one of the finest pieces of all was the gilded canopic shrine of the king. 4 graceful goddesses protect it. And here we're able to see what's inside. This beautiful chest of alabaster. When Carter lifted off the lid, he found this. 4 beautifully crafted king's heads, each made of alabaster. Inside the heads, below the heads, he found this. These miniature coffins, each of which contained the embalmed organs of the king. The liver, the lungs, the stomach, and intestines, which he would also need for his continued existence in the afterlife.
Carter died in London on March 2, 1939, of lymphoma. He was buried in Putney Vale Cemetery in London. His discovery of the Boy King is still seen as the most important archaeological discovery of all time.